Let's bow our heads for prayer before we jump in. Father, we invite you again to be with us. Just ask that your Spirit will move as we read and try to comprehend and then apply the words that you have shared with us many years ago, but that are as applicable to us today as they were then. So please be with us. We ask all because of Jesus and who he is. Amen. So hopefully you're still there, but let's take a look at the first few verses in the book of Nahum. We're gonna start in verse 1 of chapter 1. And it says, the burden against who? Nineveh. Have we already encountered Nineveh in the Minor Prophets? We have. Yep. The burden against Nineveh, the book of the vision of Nahum the Elkoshite. God is jealous, and the Lord avenges. The Lord avenges and is furious. The Lord will take vengeance on his adversaries. And he reserves wrath for his enemies. The Lord is slow to anger and great in power, and will not at all acquit the wicked. The Lord has his way in the whirlwind and in the storm, and the clouds are the dust of his feet. He rebukes the sea and makes it dry, dries up all the rivers. Bashan and Carmel wither, and the flower of Lebanon wilts. The mountains quake before him, the hills melt, and the earth heaves at his presence. Yes, the world and all who dwell in it. Who can stand before his indignation? And who can endure the fierceness of his anger? His fury is poured out like fire, and the rocks are thrown down by him. The Lord is good, a stronghold in the day of trouble, and he knows those who trust in him. But with an overflowing flood, he will make an utter end of its place, and darkness will pursue his enemies. What do you conspire against the Lord? He will make an utter end of it. Affliction will not rise up a second time. So what do we take away from this? In fact, the book of Nahum is only 3 chapters. It's a small book. There's only 3 chapters, and it's all focused on the nation of Assyria. And Nineveh is the capital of Assyria. Well, I will tell you one thing that I find intriguing is that you have 2 books, 2 whole books that are dedicated to the Assyrians. You realize that? What was the other one that we looked at not too long ago? Now, there's actually several books that mention it, but there's a whole book completely aimed at the Assyrians. And I'm using that term because if I say Nineveh, you'll get it right away. What's the other one? Come on, guys. Uh-oh. What? Jonah, yes, okay. Maybe I didn't hear it. Yes, Jonah, the book of Jonah, right? The whole book is about God telling Jonah to go warn the Ninevites, who are the Assyrians, that they are about to get destroyed. And what happened? What happened in the book of Jonah? They repented, and God said, I will not destroy you, right? Well, unfortunately, we see that they didn't stay with that, and here we are in the book of Nahum, and this is unfortunately the prophetic look that says the Assyrians will be destroyed, unfortunately. But do you know what the time frame is? You probably don't. I had to kind of go look it up because I wasn't sure. But the time frame from Jonah to Nahum is about 150 years, roughly. We don't know exactly, but that's roughly the time frame. So roughly 150 years between the time of Jonah and the time of Nahum. Now, I'll tell you what this helps me to understand. And that is that God does care about everybody, correct? I mean, even in the Old Testament, when we look at the time of Israel as God's chosen people, God cared about everybody, and he cared about the Assyrians. The other thing I see in this is that God holds all people accountable, right? Everyone will be held accountable. Nobody is going to get away with anything. And I think that's probably one of our greatest frustrations as we look at the world around us, isn't it? Now, we always want everybody else to be held accountable. We don't necessarily want to be held accountable ourselves. But when we do look around us, and there are people that we go, oh my goodness, looks like they're getting away with it. In fact, I don't have an exact number, but I'm pretty positive that most murders are not solved. Am I right in that? Does anybody know that? For some reason, I think I've heard that.
50%.
About 50%? So about half.
We're at the point where about 60% are solved. So a little bit more than half.
Okay. So you can see, so there's a lot of people, and it seems like they get away with it, right? And we look at leaders and politicians, and we go, oh my goodness, look at what they've done. And they seem to be getting away with it. Is that really the case, ultimately? No. Everyone will be held accountable. So right off the bat, though, I am really struck by the mercy and the condescension of God to say, look, you are not my chosen people, but yet I have directed 2 prophets to focus their message on you because I care about you. And God cared about those Assyrians. The other thing that we'll ultimately get to, and I think the punchline is this idea of sin not rising up the second time. But I do want you to take a look at something, and I think before we get there, as we think about this idea of God caring about everybody, but also holding everybody accountable, I want you to go to Proverbs 14 and 34. Proverbs 14 and 34. Because these are some issues that we deal with a lot. It's really kind of at the core of what we talk about and teach and instruct as Adventists. Come on. Proverbs 14, 34, and it says, righteousness exalts a nation, but sin is a reproach to any people. Now, do you believe that? So, do you think that it is somehow a terrible thing when somebody appeals to society and says, hey, we need to return to God. We need to get reacquainted with God? What do you think? It's a little bit of a loaded question, okay? Because like I say, this is the core. We talk about this a lot as Seventh-day. It's kind of at the core of the message that we give about the end times and what's going to happen right before the second coming of Christ. Any thoughts? I want to hear from you before I share some of mine.
Well, it's like enforcing Bible reading in schools. Which Bible? Who's leading it?
Okay, I think you're kind of getting at some of the issues there. Somebody else have to stick up their hand? All right. Anybody else?
As a nation, on the news, Charlie Kirk phenomenon.
There's a lot of calls and appeals. Yes, Caleb.
Well, it just says that righteousness exalts a nation. It doesn't say, but we've learned that we cannot mandate righteousness. So it's the fact when people inwardly choose righteousness, that is what exalts a nation. Mm-hmm. If supposedly you could make everybody in the nation righteous, And then that might exalt the nation, but that's just simply impossible.
Yes.
Exercising free will.
Well, you can't mandate righteousness. It has to be in your heart. I mean, you can put the 10 Commandments on the school walls all day long, but if it's not in your heart, what good is it? I mean, yeah, it might be good as far as letting you know.
All right.
You're allowed, but
Now, I heard this. You say we can't legislate righteousness, but yet we do. We must legislate righteousness. That's why we have laws against murder and theft and et cetera, right? So we have to legislate righteousness, don't we?
I meant the part where you're worshiping God.
Can't legislate moral righteousness.
Sure,
Yeah,
go
I
ahead.
didn't have
Oh,
it.
sorry, go ahead, Lee.
There's a difference between upholding moral laws and asking everybody to keep the moral laws and imposing religion through the government.
Go ahead.
You know, growing up in elementary, I wasn't exposed to religion at home, quite the opposite. At that time, in school, they taught Bible, so that was the only Bible I got. So I just see a contrast with not having in schools, because some kids don't get exposed to it. And it's reflecting on our society.
Well, and this is indeed a challenge, I think, and we look at this in the context of the Assyrians, and we see this here. The Assyrians did encounter righteousness after the preaching of Jonah, didn't they? They did. And I think, as has been pointed out, was that coerced upon them, or did they make that choice voluntarily? That was a voluntary choice, right? Go ahead, Kevin.
Well, what's it not saying? It's not saying a nation that is holy exalt itself. It says righteousness. And righteousness in our terminology is morally correct, doing right. So the nation needs to do right, not be holy. So yes, you can expect the people to follow righteous laws. Yes.
Yeah, and I obviously I was having a little fun there with that, but I do think as we consider this, I'm just going to say this. I have been a little frustrated with some of the Adventist thinking that gets all in a tizzy if they hear somebody talk about returning to God, or if that's, and they immediately equate that with our understanding of Revelation 13 and the coercion. Remember, it is not righteousness to coerce anybody into anything. That is not righteousness, right? So a coerced religion is no religion at all. I heard somebody say recently, I think it makes sense, we do not want a religious government, but we also don't want a secular society. Does that help? And I thought, hey, that makes sense. I like that. That kind of maybe helps at least partly to get a hold of what it should be. And I think somebody has mentioned here in these comments, you know, that indeed it is that people in a society must voluntarily choose God's way and righteousness. And so we do see this. And when a society does that, they will find success. And when they depart from that, they are going to find destruction and evil, and ultimately they will fall. And there has been every society since the fall of man that eventually strays and falls. There's only one government, only one form of government that will go through eternity, and that's Christ. We see that in Daniel. In fact, Daniel 2 tells us God raises up kings and he tears down kings. Righteousness exalteth a nation. But I want to move on to something else, which I think is indeed the punchline. It's what everybody remembers from the book of Nahum. But I do want to make this point, And I want you to consider that God has dedicated 2 whole books aimed at the Assyrian people. And again, I think we really see God's love for the Assyrians here, that he included 2 books in the sacred canon addressed to them to try and bring about their salvation. But the most significant verse, at least the one, as I said, that we remember, is verse 9. And I would like to start with the questions that I think every Christian has wrestled with, probably every person has wrestled with at some point in time, and that is this question of evil and a loving God. And does God allow it? Does he cause it? All of these things that swirl in our hearts. Why evil? Why the horrific events that take place? We look at the surround us. Now, for example, certainly one of the big stories in the news over the past several years has been the issue of pedophiles and well-known people, well-connected people with that. And I would dare say that there are few things that we consider as awful and as horrible and as disgusting as those issues, right? They absolutely are. And I get it. I understand how somebody who is a victim of that, and they go, God, why? Why would you allow that? Why would you allow me to be the victim of something so horrific? Something that has devastated my life and caused me to live a life that is much more painful and filled with suffering than it should have been. And those are tough questions. Those are tough questions, are they not? Have you ever had this? Have you ever had this discussion with someone? I mean, I'm not going to ask. I'll ask you rhetorically. Have you ever wrestled with these yourself? Have you ever struggled yourself and said, God, I don't get it. Why? Why do I feel so much pain? Why do I feel the feelings that I feel? If you're a loving God and you talk about, come unto me, all you that labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you what? Rest. You talk about peace. You talk about all these wonderful things, Lord, and I don't feel like I'm experiencing any of it. And if you've ever had this discussion, do you ever feel an obligation to try and convince the person of God's love and mercy and goodness? If you've ever been in this discussion, do you ever feel the obligation to do that? If you do, let me relieve you a little bit. It's not your job to do that. We can't. And sometimes we just don't have answers, right? Sometimes we just don't have answers. And I think there's oftentimes we say some stupid things in our attempt to try and vindicate God's character. We don't have to. He's perfectly capable of doing that himself, and he will do it. We don't have to, but there are some things that are very, very difficult to understand. And I get it. Those are some difficult things. And you know, Bible characters also had that same struggle, didn't they? Let's go to Job chapter 6 and verse 4. Job chapter 6, verse 4. Job 6, verse 4. It says, for the arrows of the Almighty are within me. My spirit drinks in their poison. The terrors of God are arrayed against me. Do you realize what Job is doing here? Do you realize he's calling God a terrorist? Do you realize that? He said, your terrors are arrayed against me. In other words, you're causing terror in my life. You're a terrorist. I mean, this is pretty serious. It's pretty significant. He's not the only one. He's not the only one. Go to Psalm 88. Go to Psalm 88. Psalm 88. In fact, we're going to read this together because you may have had this experience. This may express your own experience at some point, maybe even now. Maybe you're in the midst right now of this type of emotion. It says, a psalm of the sons of Korah to the chief musician. O Lord, God of my salvation, I have cried out day and night before you. Let my prayer come before you. Incline your ear to my cry. For my soul is full of troubles, and my life draws near to the grave. I am counted with those who go down to the pit, and I am like a man who has no strength. Adrift among the dead, like the slain who lie in the grave, whom you remember no more, and who are cut off from your hand. You have laid me in the lowest pit, in darkness, in the depths. Your wrath lies heavy upon me, and you have afflicted me with all your waves. You have put away my acquaintances far from me. You have made me an abomination to them. I am shut up, and I cannot get out. My eye wastes away because of affliction. Lord, I have called daily upon you. I have stretched out my hands to you. Will you work wonders for the dead? Shall the dead arise and praise you? Shall your loving kindness be declared in the grave, or your faithfulness in the place of destruction? Shall your wonders be known in the dark, and your righteousness in the land of forgetfulness? But to you I have cried out, O Lord, and in the morning my prayer comes before you. Lord, why do you cast off my soul? Why do you hide your face from me? I have been afflicted and ready to die from my youth. I suffer your terrors. There again is this say, God, you are bringing terror upon me. I have been afflicted and ready to die from my youth. I suffer your terrors. I am distraught. Your fierce wrath has gone over me. Your terrors have cut me off. They come around me all day long like water. They engulf me altogether. Loved one and friend you have put far from me, and my acquaintances into darkness. That doesn't sound all that encouraging, does it? But have you ever been there? Have you ever been there? Have you ever been in the throes of this kind of an experience? Well, you're in good company if you have. You're in very good company if you have. And when we take a look at this good God, evil world, how do we explain that? What is the one thing that we give as a reason for this? Now, I know sometimes it's hard, as I say, as you're asking questions, but why do we say this dynamic exists, this contradiction?
Because we cannot appreciate things until we lose them.
Okay.
We cannot go out there and say, hey, I have eyes. And then once you lose them, you'd be very sad that you lost.
Once you have it, we don't know what we have till it's gone, right?
Yes, you don't see dark.
They pave paradise and put up a parking lot or something like that. You guys probably don't even know what I'm talking about. Chris does. Well, yeah, it was a real popular song, wasn't it? Yeah. I'm sorry.
You don't see that light until you hit the rock bottom. And
Okay.
in the darkness.
Yeah. Thank you. Anybody else? Go ahead.
Sometimes bad things happen for a reason, to make us stronger, to make us closer to God.
Okay. Certainly, they can definitely be for our benefit. Anybody else? Why do we say, hey, this is why God allows evil? Why is this good God who is perfect and holy and righteous allowing this? What do we say is the reason for that?
I think sometimes when we are afflicted and remain faithful, we're being an example to others. That they see our faithfulness in God.
Being faithful in tough times, yes?
I think there's a couple of reasons. And at the root risk of sounding cliche, go back to the first and second chapters of Job. There is a great controversy. Satan wants to get you to curse God and join him. And that is probably more true in everyone's lives than we realize. But the things thrown at us are to get us to curse God and join Satan's side. And then the second reason God allows it is sometimes we can minister to people better when we've been through something. We can go to that person and share that experience and say, look, I went through something similar, and this is what got me through it. So,
who better to help and minister to somebody who is the victim of abuse or molestation than another victim, right? Yes.
I think it goes back to the saying, with freedom comes responsibility.
Okay.
And so when we have a God that allows us the freedom of choice, the byproduct of that is that sometimes choices of man put us in a bad spot, and then we displace the blame. And so the reality is you can't have it both ways. Like, God couldn't force everybody to follow one way. Well, then we wouldn't have a choice. That's not good. Well, when you're given the choice, well, then that means the byproduct of that is sometimes things are not going to be good. But God didn't promise us a problem-free life. God gave us salvation as a gift.
Amen.
And so my perspective on it is that as humans, we just look for somebody to blame. And so we cry out to God, and the reality is God's answer to that is, well, I sent my son to die for you and you'll be rescued.
Yeah.
So it's a matter of patience and faith.
Yes, thank you. And that's where I was headed. Typically, when we talk about this apparent contradiction, we say it exists because God wants to give us freedom of choice, correct? We talk about that. It's the freedom of choice. God does not coerce us. And again, the whole explanation of why not just destroy Lucifer when he erupts into this cancerous rebellion, why not just get rid of him right there? And that's why we say it's because it's freedom of choice. I think Nahum 1:9 is a game changer. It's a big game changer. When it says that when God is done dealing with the problem, it will never exist again. Think about that. That is a tremendous promise because what kind of peace would come to us if it were the case that if we surrendered to God, if we got to go to paradise per se, that maybe in the future this would all erupt again and we'd all be right back in the middle of it. That uncertainty would not give us true peace, would it? Could you have true rest? Come unto me, all ye that labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest. Could you have true peace and true rest if you thought that maybe somewhere in the future, even in paradise itself, this all could just start all over again? No. I think it's a game changer when God comes along and says, listen, when I get done dealing with this problem, we will never, ever have to deal with it again. And that is why that is probably the most well-known thought in the book of Nahum. Is that when God finishes up dealing with something, it's dealt with properly. He will deal with it. He is going to deal with it in such a way that not only will it not rise up the second time, but it's not going to rise up by voluntary choice of every created being. There will be no coercion. I want to go to Job, back to Job again in Job 13. Job 13. You're familiar with this verse, at least the first half of it. I don't know that we spend any time looking at the second half, though. Job 13 and verse 15. In fact, somebody read that for us. Would somebody be willing to read Job 13:15 for us?
Though he slay me, yet will so I will defend mine own ways before him.
We never think about that second part, do we? That first part is awesome. And this is what God is calling on each one of us to do. He's calling on us to say, look, I want you to be so intimate with me, to trust me so much that you know that everything I do will be for your good. But look at the last part of that. What is it? Read that again. Let that sink in a little bit.
Even so, I will defend thine own ways before him.
And if you look at the literal translation of that, he says, even so, I will defend my ways before your face. Now, we already know from the rest of Job, when does Job think that he's going to actually see the face of Jesus? When he dies? Right. No, not. You look at Job, he doesn't think that when he dies, he's going to be in the instant presence of Jesus and see his face then. It's going to be at the last day. It's going to be at the resurrection. That's when he's going to see Jesus' face. So you know what that tells me? Even though Job has come to a place of complete resolution that he will trust God, he still wants answers. He still wants to know. He wants to find out what was going on, what's happening. And that apparently is okay. It's okay for us to want to know. Yes, God wants us to get to the place where we say, Lord, I trust you so much that even if you kill me, I'm okay with that. But we can still want to get some answers. And God is transparent. I want you to think about Daniel 7. Daniel 7, 9, and 10. Hopefully you're familiar enough with it. It's the judgment scene. And what does it say? It says that the Ancient of Days comes in. It says thrones are laid down. It says the books are open and what? The judgment is set. Now, is this a closed door operation? Is this a star chamber? No. Because what does it say before that? Who's around? Thousands upon thousands, right? This is open. If you look in Revelation, at the great white throne in Revelation, who's around? Everybody, right? Everybody is. And what does the Bible tell us? What will everybody do? In Philippians 2, verse 10, what does the Bible tell us about everybody in response to judgment before God? Every knee will bow, every tongue will confess. God is transparent. He is open. He has laid it all out before everyone in the universe. And as a result of that, sin will not rise up the second time. Now, when I look at Job 13:15, I really do believe that that is a part of why the millennium is there. It's not just for the legal purposes of examining the legal case, right? I believe it's also for us, because what is Job going to be doing during the millennium? He already told us in Job 13:15. What is Job going to do during the millennium? Yes, that's what he says, isn't it? He says, look, I trust you totally, God. You can do whatever you want to me. Do whatever you want. But when we get together, I still have some questions. I still want to know. And I do believe that that is a part of the process during the millennium. That we'll be able to ask God. We're going to be able to say, God, why? How? And God will be able to tell us. Because, you know, in reality, there are some things that you cannot say through a text, through an email, through a phone call. Some things need to be communicated face to face. And think about it. When God tells us some of these most difficult elements of our life, he tells it to us face to face. And he does it so that we can hear the tone in his voice. We can see the look in his eyes. We can feel the embrace of his arms when he is telling us these things that occurred in our life. And then, once that's all done, what does the Bible say he's going to do with the tears? He's going to wipe them away. And then forever, those things will be gone and put away and never rise again. And that is the role that you and I will play throughout eternity. Okay, now I know, and I've said it before, and you're going to hear me talk about this many times because I love this. I absolutely love it. There is maybe a tad speculation, but I think it's pretty good speculation. And that is, we are going to take the place of Lucifer. You realize that? We are going to, the humanity, the human race, where is God's throne going to be? Right here. We are going to take the place of Lucifer. And what was Lucifer's role in heaven before he fell? The covering cherub. What does that mean? That means he was the closest to God, right? And what was his job? What was his role then as the covering cherub to the rest of created beings? To glorify God? Yes, absolutely. And that's true. I'm thinking of something a little different, but to justify God, yes. To communicate, to represent. He's an ambassador. He is the one that is the closest to God. And he is the one who would be able to then communicate to people. God is everything he claims to be. You know, I saw an article not too long ago talking about how, it's talking about different celebrities. And you've heard the thing, you don't want to meet your hero, right? They say you don't want to do that because when you find out what they're really like, it'll ruin all of the thoughts you had toward them, right? When you find out what some celebrity that you have so much adoration for. But it was Lucifer's job to be able to communicate to everybody that, yes, God is who he says he is. His character is absolutely 100% what he claims to be. And that's going to be our role throughout eternity. And I do believe God is going to continue to create. And if I'm wrong, I'm wrong. I don't know. So if you disagree, I'm not fighting with you. But I do think that he will continue to create. And I think that will be our role. I really think that will be our role. And I think that maybe as we're going around someday, I'll say, hey, Caleb, let's head out to Alpha Centauri 93. God just created a new world out there. And we're going to go out there and we're going to see him. Now, I don't understand. Again, this is a little bit speculation, but because it says the former things have passed away, I get that. Again, if you want to argue, go ahead and argue, right? Go ahead. I'm not going to fight. But it does seem that our role is this covering cherub, that in some way we'll go out there and we'll visit them and we'll be able to sit down and talk to them and say, hey, God, I know you're new in existence. You've just come into existence and everything is so awesome. Let me tell you that this God that created you, He's as good as it seems. Don't ever get a notion of rebellion. Don't ever get the notion of Lucifer, right? Don't ever get the notion that maybe somehow we're being restricted. And as we talk to them and we explain, somehow we'll be able to say, hey, let me tell you about Jesus. Because we lived in a world that rebelled. And Jesus came and offered his life for us. He sacrificed his life for us so that we could be here talking to you. And let me prove it to you. When we go next Sabbath, right? Isaiah 66, from one Sabbath to the next, when we get together, I want you to go up to Jesus and I want you to ask him to show you the scars that are in his hands and in his feet and in his side. Right? And that's what we can do, and we'll be able to say, we know by experience that God is everything that he says he is. There is no reason to rebel. There is no reason to have doubt. None. I can only imagine that this is a part of it, and I'm probably so far wrong that it's unbelievable, but I'll be excited when we get there to know that we can have a role throughout the universe, to know that Nahum 1:9 is absolutely true. That God has finished dealing with the sin and rebellion problem. And when he's finished dealing with it, it is done. It is finished. Never again will we have to go through this. Never again will we have to suffer the way that this world has had to suffer because of sin and rebellion.